Tim Forsman, and I just want to give a quick update on the work that we've been doing at Little Muck Shelter in the Mapungubwe National Park. If you've watched my previous videos, I've chatted at length about the project, what we're trying to achieve with these goals, so this is just a quick progress report in a sense of the work that we've carried out at the site so far. Here in this image you can see Little Muck Shelter. It has a nice sheltered area, as you can see on the right, and then a large open area to the left. All of this was occupied by the people living at the site, but we're focusing our attention on the shelter area, so that's on the right hand side of the screen. But let me just situate everything once again in the bigger scheme of things, because it's always important, at least with archaeology, to think about these bigger landscapes. So the area that I'm talking about is sometimes called the Middle Limpopo Valley, the Shashi Limpopo Confluence area, but this is where the Mapungubwe National Park is. It's, as you can see, in the grey block and more or less the middle of that map, and it's surrounded by some pretty significant archaeological landscapes as well. And that includes the Zimbabwean area, which has sites like Great Zimbabwe, post-dating Mapungubwe, as well as Mapela Hill. In Botswana, there's also a lot of developments that are important in the context of what's going on in this valley. And sites like Tuutwe, Kaitsa, Busutwe are all really important places in terms of larger socio-political developments. But what we're really interested in is what's happening in this particular area. So here's a close-up of that landscape. On the right, you can see where it says MPG, that stands for Mapungubwe. And that's obviously a really significant site. Mapungubwe is, excuse the hardy-dars who are also attending today's talk. So Mapungubwe is a really significant site. It's the first city centre or state-level society that we have in Southern Africa. There are people who contend this and suggest it may have been another site, for example, Mapela Hill. But on present evidence and available evidence, Mapungubwe is almost certainly where it seems to have occurred. But that is still up for debate and discussion. Nevertheless, around about AD 1220s when Mapungubwe was established, K2 next to it was occupied before Mapungubwe, and SC, which stands for Schroeder, even before K2. So the site that I'm talking about is Little Muck Shelter, as I've mentioned, and you can see also again, roughly in the middle of the map, LMS. This is Little Muck. So this is the landscape immediately around Little Muck Shelter. You can see it there on the top left of your screen. It's not far from a site called Leokwe Hill, and Leokwe Hill is a really significant site. It was occupied from at least the Zizo period, up until well into the historic period actually. But the time frame that I'm focusing on, of course, is around the late middle 1st millennium AD and the early 2nd millennium AD. So Little Muck, it was initially excavated because of this close proximity to this Leokwe Hill site, which was quite a prominent site at the turn of the 1st millennium AD. The excavators Simon Hall believed that potentially at this site we might get a really nice sequence of contact and interaction occurring between people living at Leokwe Hill and those living at Little Muck. So he excavated the site in the late 90s, and that's exactly what he found. The distance between these sites is about 1.5 kilometers, very close. And he found quite an interesting sequence showcasing close contact and social relations between at least those at Little Muck and farmers in the near vicinity, more than likely. And this included a massive focus on craft goods. So craft production was occurring at the site on very large scales. What exactly was being produced, I'm not sure. It's because it's not at the site anymore. And what they were getting in return for that is things like glass beads, metal, as well as possibly domestic livestock. Well, we haven't done fauna analyses yet. We hope we will be doing that soon with our excavations, but and then we'll be able to determine whether there are sheep and goat and cow bones in the assemblage. They may also have been getting, well, they were getting ceramics, but what they may have been receiving are things inside the ceramics, inside those pots, like milk and various other goods, blood, possibly from livestock, possibly also meat. So we're not sure, but they were getting various goods in return. So let's focus more on Little Muck. This is a diagram of Little Muck as a whole. The light grey area is bedrock that's exposed around the site. The white in between that and the kopje is sand. So this is mostly an Aeolian sand, or mixed in with the kopjes that are eroding. So you have this nice unconsolidated sandy unit around most of the site. And you can see the shelter in this map is in the southern portion of the map, up against the kopje itself. The site there, the top left, the ceiling extends at an angle. That's the sheltered area of the site where we, again, as I mentioned, that's where we're focusing most of our attention. It also has a beautiful rock art sequence. You can see some giraffe, for example. Bottom left, you can see some engravings in the rock. These are grooves, and there's little pits made in the rock as well. And on the right is a gaming board, a Mancala board, and Zorro. It goes by a number of names. And this is outside on the rocks, the bedrock in front of the site. There's quite a lot of this actually there. Hollows, grooves, cupules carved into the rock, such that Tom Huffman thought that possibly the site became a boys' initiation site for farmer communities much later, in the early 2nd millennium AD. But this is an interesting part of the sequence, is how did that shift occur, which is something we'll be examining as well. So this is our map that we produced the site. We produced this using an EDM. So if you have a look at the squares on the ground, basically those are excavation units. Those that are light grey are Simon Hall and his team's excavation units. So they were excavated previously. When we first visited the site, we re-established his trench, the one inside the shelter, so the 2 squares on the right. We re-established the boundaries of that square, and we set up a baseline off of that. And then from that, we established all of our squares. So what's nice about this is our squares fit into the same grid that the previous team used at the site. And that makes it it makes it easier to relate our excavation locations to theirs. The darker grey squares are what we excavated. So we excavated a fair amount in the southern area of the site that's inside that sheltered area. Unfortunately, we got a lot of rain. I'll talk about that maybe just now, but it made the deposit very wet and difficult to dig through. It also made it very difficult for us to identify stratigraphic layers. So what we decided, so the stratigraphic layers are your deposits in the ground. We excavate, some of them are cultural, so for example hearths or fire pits. Some of them are very ashy, they can be filled with dung if animals were crawled in this area. And when we dig down underground as archaeologists, we're constantly looking for these things, because sometimes they separate occupation phases or separate activities or time periods. Deposition in the site. Sometimes erosion wrecks them, inverts them, flips them, and generally what happens is what's down below is older than what's up above. A very simple way of thinking about it. So because this was all wet, everything kind of seemed like the same. So we abandoned our excavations in that area. Part of the reason we were happy to do that is because we're going to be digging the site for at least 2 to 3 years. So when we go back, normally we dig in winter. We couldn't dig in winter because of lockdown. So when we go back, we will re-excavate those portions and continue digging there. So it's not wasted material. It will still be studied. But the 2 squares you can see at the top part of the site that we excavated, and that was really fascinating what we found there. And that's really what I'm going to talk a bit about today. So archaeological work is quite a lot of fun. This is a little video of our drive to site every day. There's a group of us went up. We went up in October in 2020. Sorry, the video is about to collapse. Boom, there it goes. There we go. So we went up in October 2020. There were 8 of us all together. And what we typically do is, as I mentioned, is go up in winter. But with the pandemic affecting everyone around the world, we weren't able to go up when we wanted to go up. So we had a choice of not going up, of course, at all in 2020, and that would make the year total write-off. But their students rely on this data, our projects rely on this data, our funding is generally limited for a year, and we can motivate for extensions, especially given a year like 2020. But obviously we wanted to get into the field. At the end of the day, this was our drive to work. You can't really argue too much with that. So we decided, well, let's get up as quickly as we can. October was the soonest we could get up. Obviously, November, it starts to get quite warm there. If you'd like to know what it feels like, just turn your oven on and put your head in there for an hour. No, I'm joking, please don't do that. But it does get pretty hot, and working out in the sun, as you can see, a day like this was pretty sunny. You could be looking at temperatures in upper 30s, 40s. So it can be quite tricky. So this is now, we've left our camp. We're in the Mapungubwe National Park. Picking up our guide, Kamogelo. He was awesome. And this is driving through the reserve to get to our site. Please note that I'm not actually driving the speed. This video has been sped up so that it doesn't take the full 20 or so minutes that it took us to get to site. So it's quite like driving through this area. You can see the landscape. It's broken by koppies. These sandstone ridges are running generally east to west on this landscape. They're not everywhere. They're only more along the Limpopo River, and they stretch out into Botswana, but not by very far. On the South African side, they're up to about 4 or 5 kilometers south of the Limpopo River. And then the sandstone is not exposed any longer. And you get this nice undulating landscape. But where we are now is driving actually in the Limpopo floodplain, in the mobile belt. We're below the sandstone ridge. You can see one over there. This is in fact the ridge where the site's in. And so this landscape is broken by these koppies, these ridges that run through the landscape. But you can see it's dominated by mapani trees, and then it breaks around these koppies as well, where you start to get nice fruiting species, succulents, and so on. Anyway, so here we are arriving at the site. The site's not on the right, and this is where we were going to spend our days. So on site, if you haven't seen an archaeological excavation, or if you're not an archaeologist, there's a lot of activities you immerse yourself within while doing your work, and that ranges from mapping. Bottom left, you can see us mapping. There's me smiling. It's actually raining on that day, so can't really see it. In fact, shortly after that, the massive storm came down, and that little gazebo you can see in the background provided some much needed respite from the rain, as well as the shelter. But unfortunately, the shape of the ceiling is almost wave-like, so a lot of the water was running between these two crests, and like a waterfall coming into our site. So we were all quite sopping wet after that, and a few of us very muddy because one of the vehicles that was with us on that particular day got stuck in the mud. And I'm telling you all of this also because this is just to give you a sense of the experiences that we have while we're excavating as archaeologists. The top image is quite cool. On the horizon, which is only about 50 meters from the site, is a herd of elephants, and they're moving through the rocks to drink water that's pooling within these little, now sort of temporary rock pools. So it's really great to be on site. There's all kinds of experiences. The one day we arrived and there was a hyena kill on site. It was really cool. You could see the drag marks, and we couldn't tell if it was going into our site or away from our site. We eventually realized it was going away from our site. So the kill had been made inside the shelter as far as we could tell, and the carcass had been dragged away. When we got to the site, we realized what had actually happened was a hyena had grabbed one of our sandbags that we used to protect the edges of our excavations and also the floor of our excavations, had grabbed one of the sandbags and dragged it away. So it wasn't a kill, it was just a sandbag. Fortunately, we did recover the beaten up sandbag. But yeah, so there's a lot of really cool things that happen on site. But obviously the reason we're here is to do archaeology. Here you can see some images of the excavations. So these are the various different units. The bottom left image and the bottom right image, and actually the top right image, are all of that southern excavation that we had to abandon because of the rain. You can actually see how wet it's getting, especially on the top right image. Everything sort of started to appear the same kind of color, and it was very difficult to dig through. So when we moved to the other area, fortunately, it was on a slight rise on the surface. The water had been channeling away from that based on the topography of the shelter floor, and it was completely dry, which was very fortunate for us. And it was really fantastic because as we dug down, we started going through these various layers with a lot of archaeology in it, but we eventually hit this incredibly rich layer. And this is what I'm brushing up over here. It's a really rich layer with a lot of archaeology in it. A lot of stone tools, shells. It was quite a spectacular, about 15 to 25 centimeters in some areas, rich with archaeology. This is the period that we're most interested in. It looks like it dates to about 8900, so it's when craft activities at the site really intensified. So once we start analyzing this, I think we're going to find some really fantastic results, and that's something that we'll talk about hopefully in a video to come. For now, it's just to chat about what we did and some of the fun things as well. So yeah, this as you can see, very careful brushing up, just creating a pile in the middle of very loose sand, which we'll then put into buckets and sieve through for artifacts. In this video, we're uncovering this layer, so we're exposing it all across the surface, and we'll then start to dig it. Excavations are a very time-consuming process. We take a lot of records. We move very slowly and meticulously. What I was doing in that previous video is exposing a different unit in the ground. So basically, as I mentioned the stratigraphy earlier, if we think about it in very simple terms, you have red soil at top, then you have green soil below that, then you have blue soil below that. So we dig through the red soil. When we start to see that green soil appearing, we don't dig into the green soil, we leave that. We remove all of the red stuff, and then we move into the green stuff. And when we bag everything from the red stuff, we can call it bag number 1, red unit. We then dig down the green into the green. When we start to see the blue appearing, we level off on that again. So we remove all the green on top of the blue, we don't dig into it, and that's bag number 2, green unit, and so on. It's obviously a lot more complicated, and the bottom left image here kind of shows that this is at the end of the excavation when we've reached bedrock. There's all these different layers there. I think we identified, oh man, it was something like 12 different or 13 different layers in this in a 2 by 1 meter square, which is really, it's a lot. Some of them are very difficult to see changes, others are very clear and distinct. Some might just be different in terms of moisture content. Obviously, on the top left, there's journals going left, right, and center. And in this particular journal, you can see me drawing. I'm basically drawing out the stratigraphy so that I can keep track of change as we go down. This is called a Harris matrix, just a simple diagram to draw out what's going on at the site. And then the bottom right is an actual map of the wall that you're looking at on the left. It's actually a different wall, but it's the same kind of principle. That wall you're looking on the left, we map them out, and we have these nice stratigraphic profiles, and that's what I'm doing over there. So this particular trip, we had a lot of challenges, and the team that came along was really fantastic. It was a nice combination of experience and youth, people learning about archaeology, coming on their first excavation, and other people having done a bunch of excavations and being more familiar with the procedures. So it was a really great experience. The team was super, and I think everyone sort of benefited hugely. We had a number of visitors to site as well, and that was great to welcome people to our site, to show them what was going on. And also we had some people joining us for several days who I think they found it very interesting, or maybe they just enjoyed watching us get dirty in the shelter. but they came back again and again and helped out, and that's really great for archaeology as well, to have people visit us on our sites, to participate in the work that we're doing. It means a lot to us. So it was really special for us to be able to experience that and to share those experiences with other people as well. So that, in a nutshell, is what we did during our trip in 2020. There is more to come. We are going to be going back. We have a lot of really cool finds to talk about, but these are finds that, once we understand more what's going on, their relationship contextually, stratigraphically, and also chronologically, really importantly, we'll talk more about them. So for now, I'd rather just say that watch the space. There's a lot more to come, but I can't jump and divulge too much information just yet. And then, the top right image, you might be wondering. I'm not going to explain that in too much detail, but I will say that it was due to a fine, and I was forced to accept the consequences. We always have fines evenings on these trips. At the end of the day, these trips are a lot of fun as well, and that was part of my punishment. But thanks very much for listening, and who knows, maybe one day you'll be able to come visit us on site, see what we're doing, have a look at the excavations, the rock art, and learn a little bit more about the amazing history that we have here in Southern Africa.